Well, g'day prospectors, welcome to a rather wet Leonora. Tony Pilkington from Gold Talk Leonora. Just thought I'd make the most of a bit of a rainy day. I had to come out and see one of our plants anyway and just make sure that was going alright. And I can still get through, so that's okay. In case you're wondering what I'm holding on to there, that's my crystal ball. Everyone seems to ask me questions like, where's the gold and what's this doing and what's that doing? And my standard response that Lisa hates is, I don't have a crystal ball, mate. So one of my mates thought he'd get the better of me and bought me a crystal ball. It actually works really good. I'm quite impressed with it. It's improved my my prediction of the future leaps and bounds. Ah, here she is. Here's the big girl. What I thought I'd do today is just have a chat about buying tenements, buying leases, because again, it's a question I get asked a lot, and it's quite a trap for the young player. There we go. There's Debbie. It's quite a trap for the young player, so I thought it's worth just running through a few of the basics. The thing is that mining tenements, so prospecting licenses, exploration licenses, mining leases, can all be bought and sold, so they can be transferred to another person's name. SPLs can actually, that can happen with an SPL as well. I can sell an SPL if I have written permission from the underlying tenement holder. All right, they have a lot to say about that. The thing is that the first things first is what is a tenement worth? And I'm just going to say a 200 hectare prospecting license. And to put that in perspective, we're talking about approximately 1 kilometre by 2 kilometres of dirt, or any variation. That's 200 hectares, so fair chunk of Western Australia. To peg that out, it's going to cost me about $1,000 for the application fee of $354, I think it is, and first year's rent in advance, and about $1,000 a year in real money leaving my back pocket to maintain it. Okay. So what is it worth to sell? The answer to that is a non-answer. It's a politician's answer, but it's true. And that is that anything, any commodity, is only worth what someone is willing to pay on any given day. That's all a tenement is worth. I would have thought more around the $5,000 mark would be about right if it's a good tenement. But these days people are asking $15,000, $20,000, that sort of thing. And to be fair, they're getting it. So that is what a tenement is worth on today's market. I'll address that in a minute once I polish up my crystal ball, and we can talk further on that. At $2.22 a litre, I need to conserve diesel. So, that's sort of what they're going for. You see them on Gumtree, you see them on Marketplace, 8 to 20 grand, somewhere around there. The question is, what is it that you're buying? So a tenement and all its liabilities, so if it has rehabilitation liabilities, that is transferred, that goes with the tenement, so that becomes your problem. But what you're doing is you're buying the lease from the previous tenement holder. And the thing to remember is that there's a few traps in that alone. Because the thing to remember is that, let's say this prospecting license, if the tenement is granted, then after application, then you automatically get 4 years. And then you can apply for another 4 years, which is then reviewed by compliance, I think it is, at DMERS. And most of the time that'll be granted. You'll apply for it usually under the prospecting that has taken place requires or justifies more prospecting to take place, something like that. Yeah, so you get the 4+4. If you do any ground disturbing activities, you need to have a program of works prospecting in place. And it needs to be current. Now, the thing is, it's a common held belief that that a program of works is valid for the life of a tenement. And I got myself confused with this only a few weeks back. It happens, you know. The thing is that it does not carry through for the life of the tenement. A program of works, once approved, is valid for 4 years. So the thing is, if you buy a tenement that's in its 5th year or 4th year, let's say, and it's sold with an active program of works, there's a fair chance you need to find out when that program of works was actually applied for, because if it was applied on grant, basically when the tenement's granted, then they applied, you might only have 3-6 months of the POW left, and that can bring you unstuck pretty bloody quickly. The thing is, why do you want to buy a tenement? I am a huge fan of normal prospectors leasing out a bit of real estate. Because let's not forget, what prospectors do, we explore, we gain control of the ground or access to it, and we work it. That is what prospecting is. Exploration, tenement control, and then working the dirt and getting the bloody gold out. That's what we do. Most of us do it pretty bloody well. All right, so only doing one part of it, the exploration, is you're missing a trick. That's just my humble opinion. And it's, if you're a serious prospector, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing it for 2 weeks of the year or 2 months of the year or year round, that's irrelevant. But it's actually, I think, a really wonderful feeling having skin in the game. That's the way I look at it. It's a wonderful feeling having a little bit of Western Australia that you can sort of call your own. It comes at a financial burden, right? But it is a very good thing. Okay. The thing is that unless you have that skin in the game, or you have had that skin in the game, like you've owned tenements before, to be honest, I don't think you can really get an understanding of, you know, some of the problems and the benefits that tenement holders have. I think if you're, you know, just using 40Es and pending ground, I think it really is limiting. I think it's a great place to start, don't get me wrong. But I think sort of going down the track of getting a few tenements and starting to think about working a bit of ground, it's not for everyone, but it has a lot of advantages to understanding what prospecting and mining is all about in Western Australia. Okay, so that being said, the only reason you really want to get a tenement is to disturb the ground, right? To use a dry blower, a bulldozer, a wet plant, whatever your poison is. That's really the only reason to do it, which means it's got to have alluvial gold on it in the first place. For me, that's a no-brainer. I reckon that the few main reasons people get tenements would be to work it as real estate and as a campsite. So the thing is, as a campsite, makes perfect sense to me. You have a nice base camp, even a 10-hectare block only costs you $33 a year in real money. And then you work the area around, it's cheaper than staying at the caravan park. I've got no problems with that. No security, but you've got your own piece of dirt that you control as much as the government lets you. And you can say who is and who is not on that ground. To get the lease to work is really, really a valid reason. The two reasons Lisa and I will go broke prospecting, which will never happen, is that we either chase gold that is not there, so we're spending money believing that there'll be gold rather than using our noggins, or we run out of ground to work. Therefore, we need lots of tenements. We need to have work stacked up ahead of us, and plenty of jobs to go to. That's the nature of professional prospecting these days. The third thing in terms of real estating, it is the one business model in prospecting and mining that repeatably works, and that is you acquire tenements during the off seasons when we're in a bust cycle and there's plenty of VCL around, vacant Crown land, and then you offload them in times right about now. And, you know, Lisa and I get companies calling us up, not as regularly at the moment, but certainly was. And we had some key tenements. Absolutely, we'll take the money and run every time. And the chances are when it goes back to a bust cycle in a year or two's time, we'll pick them up again and start the whole process again. I have no problems with that at all. But that's one side of it, and you need to know what and where you're doing that. I would focus on the getting ground to work. The first, actually what I'll do, I'll just go back a step. The thing is with a campsite, it makes perfect sense, but don't forget with your WA miners right, you can camp on pending ground or vacant Crown land. So you don't need to buy a tenement to camp on, but what it does is two things. One is it sort of gives you that step into the game, as I said, that I call it the skin in the game. So you got that feeling of having a little bit of Western Australia under your belt. But most importantly, it says you can dictate who is and who is not on that tenement. So the thing is, if you're on pending ground, it could be like a bloody caravan park. If you've got your own tenement, you can say, "See you guys, I wish to run around naked or do whatever it is you need to do," and away they go. Okay, so that's that side. Would I pay $20,000 or $10,000 for a campsite? Not in a million years. I can't see the point of it. All right, so that brings us back to the next thing, having ground to work. I think a lot of people buy tenements because they want to go somewhere where they're not hassled by people. They're not looking over their shoulder. They don't have to worry about what is perceived to be complicated mining laws in Western Australia. They're out here for fun and bloody good on them, and they just want to go out and bip a bit of gold. That makes sense to me. What I'd say is that, and this is where the biggest problem with buying tenements is, that often that carrot is dangled about, plenty of gold left. Plenty of gold left to detect. The thing is, that is very unlikely to be the case. There will be some exceptions, but the fact of the matter is, and this is where I think the crooks come into play, buyer beware and all of that, because you'll see them on Gumtree and Marketplace, and there'll be things like, there was one person, she said, we're getting an ounce a week off this ground. The thing is, if you're getting an ounce a week, why would you be selling it? And most of it is just outright lies. I mean, I know a lot of the ground that's bought and sold around here, and this one, and as said, she said, there's an ounce a week coming off it. I knew where the patch was, and there was never an ounce a week coming off it. Other people say, there's good gold left on it, but I haven't got time to work it. Come in, sucker. Paint the tenement nipple pink for suckers. And I've been in situations where, we're totally snowed under with work. But if there was easy gold to be picked up with a detector, either we will do that or I will find someone to do it on my behalf for a percentage. So I don't buy that sort of argument as well. It therefore leaves you with a block of ground that has been flogged to death in terms of metal detecting, or more than likely never had any gold on it in the first place. Okay, that's the most likely scenario. So again, I'd say, why would you spend $5, $10, $20,000 for a block that's a duffer? Nothing on it. It does not make sense to me. The one that I would talk about is where you want to use earth moving equipment, because we do get contacted regularly by people around Australia saying, hey Tone, I'd like to buy a little dry blower and get a little block going and all the rest of it. And to buy a block to do that, it goes against what I sort of believe in, because I believe you do your prospecting, you gain control of the ground, and then you go out and work it. But the thing is, what you need to remember at the moment is that we're at the top of the mining boom. And this is where my little polished up crystal ball will come into it. We're at the top of the mining boom and there is no ground available. Very, very little ground, certainly nothing for prospective for dry blowing or anything else. So, if you're a bloke in your 50s or 60s and you want to get in and do a bit of dry blowing, how are you going to do it? The only two ways you're going to do it is to approach companies and get their permission, or to buy a lease so that you can get started. The first option is actually your smartest option. It's also your cheapest option. But because it's the hardest option, you actually have to put some effort in. Most people don't want to do it. They'd rather just buy a lease. If you purchased a tenement for whatever price, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, and you do not do your own due diligence and test or sample that block out for yourself, then all I can say is that a fool and their money is soon parted, right? And it'll wind up in tears for you. If I was looking to set up a little dry blowing operation, someone had a block for sale for 20 grand, and I was seriously thinking about it because they've said that there's patches of gold on it. It's good dry blowing country. The aeromagnetics look good and show some nice shear zones through there and what have you, but I haven't got time to work it. I'd be inclined to say, righto, what I need is a week to go onto that block and sample it for myself. In another one of my little videos down the track, I'll demonstrate how you actually sample a block out. But I would want to, before I spend any hard-earned cash, I would want to check that block out thoroughly to see if that's going to suit my needs. The moral of that story is that you need to have enough knowledge behind you to know what it is that you're looking for. There's always an element of a punt in it, because it doesn't matter how much sampling you do, until you start actually running material, you're not going to know what the absolute head grade's going to be for your free recoverable gold. But you need to be in a position where you know how to do some sampling and go onto those blocks and do some sampling. The thing is, if someone said, you ask them, righto, well, that's the conditions, I'd like to go and have a look at it, I'll buy it subject to a week's sampling. And if they say no, well, they're Freddie, walk away. That's a no-brainer. Obviously, they know a little bit more than they're letting on. The thing I'd say is that, as the sort of last thing I'll touch on, which is my crystal balls, and that is that we are at the top of the mining cycle at the moment. And if you've come into prospecting in the last 2 or 3 years, or even a little bit longer, 3 or 4 years, you've only known things when there's no ground available. The one sure thing about mining is that bust will follow boom, will follow bust. There's an old saying that I'll get into trouble, but I'm not against rock lickers, but it's just a saying, and that is that today's Australian exploration geologist is tomorrow's taxi driver in Kalgoorlie. And those times are coming, because looking into my crystal ball there on the dash, thanks Craig, is that I reckon by about this time next year, we're going to be in a downturn. Right? I think that the mining boom has gone on for long enough. It has to break sometime. There's reasons why I think what I do. No conspiracy theories, anything else like that. But I reckon about this time, by Christmas onwards, I reckon a lot of pain's going to start. Now, when the junior explorers run out of money and they can't reprovision with plenty of money from the share market, you know, and they get down to their last $1 or so, they're flatlining. And what they have to do is start dropping off tenements that you know, aren't producing. And what you will see at some stage, and whether I'm right with the timing is irrelevant, but once we get a downturn, you will see junior explorers and private individuals, companies, even mid-tiers, starting to shed dirt. And you'll start seeing a lot of black holes opening up on Tengraph, or white holes as they are now, and there'll be tenements aplenty. Tenements aplenty. There'll be vacant crowned land aplenty. These are big generalisations, but it's usually the way things work. Usually it's that marginal country which is pegged as well. That's sort of the first to go, and then you start seeing some really good alluvial ground starting to come up. That's the time to not buy tenements if you have time up your sleeve, is not to buy tenements, just be patient, see what next year brings, and go out and peg your own. It's easy to do, and that's part of prospecting is learning how to peg your own dirt. And then suddenly your punt is $1,000. It's still big money, but it's still, you know, $1,000 for a couple of hundred hectares versus $20,000 for someone's money-making venture. That to me makes more sense. The caveat I'd put over that is something that I'm, you know, painfully aware of these days more and more. And I'm not sounding morbid, but it is actually a real consideration, and that is that none of us watching these videos or the mug presenting them is going to live forever. And so you've also got to bring into the equation that your own personal financial circumstances. Because if you go and spend a ton of money on a tenement, what it may do is buy you time. Now, your personal circumstances might be that you've retired, you've got a couple of $1 million sitting in the bank burning a hole from a good super payout, and there's plenty of you out there in that sort of situation. There's plenty of people with deep pockets that are loving their prospecting. And in that particular case, you say, righto, well, I'm 65, 70 or 75 or 80. I want to get on with this while I still can, while I'm still physically able. So rather than waiting for 2 or 3 years for ground to become available first, to peg it, a year of application, maybe you've got another year of native title and pissing around with it, maybe it is worth your time to spend 10 or 20 grand on a good block, okay, and just get on with it. Life is short. So even though it's not the way I would recommend people do it, you know, as I'm sort of losing people around me a bit over the last year or so, I get it, and it's not a crazy idea to do it that way. So that's just another point that I'd throw in there. If you're going to buy a block and with view of you know, a nice campsite, well, all you need is soft soil for the crapper and phone range and a little bit of high ground to camp on. So that's pretty easy. If you are buying it with view to do some work on, i.e. get a little dry blower and work that way, I'm happy for you to give me a phone call, and in the short term, and I'll go through some of the things that you really need to look at in terms of sampling the ground up to see if it's worthwhile. I'm happy to sort of give people a little bit of guidance there. As I get time, I'll do another couple of videos which will hopefully point you in the right direction anyway. So I think I've covered most of the bases there. The crystal ball has been working very well lately, and as I said, it's seeing a lot of pain ahead for a lot of people. But you know, sort of in 2023, somewhere around there. But that's a huge advantage for prospectors, because that's the time you start picking up good ground. and then spending the next, 10 years working it. So I hope that's been of some help to you. Don't become another one of those bloody mugs that spends $10,000 or $20,000 for crap ground. There's plenty of it out there for sale. Just be a little bit cautious. I don't like people getting burnt in this game, but as I keep saying, there's more sharks in prospecting and mining than are swimming around in the Indian Ocean. Another reason I don't like the water. Anyway, prospectors, I hope that's been of some help to you. We'll catch up with you next time. See ya. I'll get out and look at Debbie, see what's going on there. Oopsie daisies. Hello, Debbie. How you going?